Hi, I'm Greg, Lead Developer Advocate at Hedera Hashgraph, and this is an introduction to our public ledger.
Our vision, it's a big vision, is to create such trusted, secure and empowered digital future for all. We'll do this by offering a decentralized platform that drives disintermediation, creates trust among parties who don't know each other, which is fast, which is fair, and which is secure, with a robust governance model on top. We'll go through how we encapsulate all of these, or how Hedera Hashgraph encapsulates all these components and drives us towards that vision of a trusted, secure, and empowered digital future. So, why Hedera Hashgraph? What is it that is different? And we feel that there are 4 reasons that needed to be overcome for a public distributed ledger to achieve mass adoption: technology, governance, security, and stability. Looking at the technology, we have with Hedera Hashgraph 3 core services. There may be more in the future, but these are the ones we're launching with: cryptocurrency, smart contracts, and file storage. And underneath all of those services is the Hashgraph consensus algorithm, which itself sits on top of the internet and whatever supports the internet itself. Applications are built on top of Hedera Hashgraph, and they can make use of any of the 3 services using the API, which we'll talk about in more detail later on. And they can use HBAR in order to pay transaction fees to the network, and also exchange value with their users through their decentralized application. So, how fast is Hedera Hashgraph? Well, it's very fast. It's 100,000 transactions per second in a single shard. Sharding is part of a longer-term plan. This is to not to kind of reduce a bottleneck. This is to add to the 100,000 plus in the first shard. So 2 shards, 200,000, and so on and so forth. It's fair. The platform offers fair timestamp, transaction ordering, and access. I touched on that in the DLT 101 earlier. But you can send your transactions to any node on the network. All of the nodes participate in consensus, and the transactions are therefore ordered by median timestamp as agreed by the nodes through the consensus algorithm. However much gas you pay, for example, for a smart contract execution, will not alter the order of your smart contract transaction. Its arrival in the network and the consensus as agreed upon by the nodes will determine the order in which your smart contract function is run. And nodes cannot collude to prevent anyone from accessing the network. It's not possible for nodes to stop you from, well, in fact, they would all have to stop one particular IP address or something from accessing the network. The point here is that every node is able to accept transactions, and more specifically, a node cannot, during transaction validation on other DLTs, cannot decide not to include a particular transaction. That's just not possible, hence fairness of access. And it's secure. It's asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant. It's the highest level of security that a consensus algorithm can afford. And it's a core component of our ability to prevent DDos and Sybil attacks, while ensuring the network consensus is not being manipulated. So it's fast, yes, it's fair, yes, and it's secure. Let's look at the Hashgraph consensus algorithm briefly. Dr. Lehman-Baird is the inventor of the Hashgraph algorithm. It achieves the gold standard of security with asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. It's incredibly fast, it's bandwidth efficient, and it's a leaderless system. And this is very, very important. The minute you have a leader in a DLT, that leader is susceptible to attack. And any DLT that has a leader or has a leader elected has that susceptibility to attack. And even if a new leader is elected, well, if I'm a client or a node on the network, I will very soon know who the other leader is. And if I'm a malicious node, I can simply switch my attack from the old leader to the new one, and it just round robins around the network. So not having a leader is very important for security. For governance, Hedera Hashgraph offers a unique and robust form of governance. It's maintained by a council of known and reputable global enterprises and organizations. And the council is committed to the support and evolution of the public ledger infrastructure, ultimately with millions of public nodes. A different style of governance maybe to what you've been used to. But then Hedera Hashgraph wouldn't be Hedera Hashgraph if it wasn't different. So the council will consist of up to 39 blue chip enterprise organizations in 18 industries across 10 different regions. So I talked earlier about geographical distribution of nodes as being a measure of decentralization. 18 industries and 10 regions is a measure of decentralization of the governing council. It means that no one industry, be it banking, insurance, or automotive, can take control of the network. They will be fighting with the 17 other industries that are represented by the council members in terms of their individual interests, if you want, as industries. Each member has an equal 2.57 influence. That's 1 divided by 39, or 100 divided by 39. And they are term limited. Every year there will be new members coming in, and old members will be going out. It's kind of 1 in, 1 out, up to 39. And all the initial members are selected by Hedera Hashgraph for now. The prospective new members will be selected by the council committee moving forwards. So what will the council do? Well, they have a number of different responsibilities which will be taken on by the membership of the council, from seats at chairing seats to committees to boards and so on and so forth. All of those responsibilities have limited terms in place, which you can see here on the slides, to ensure that no single party or centralized group can possibly wield too much power over any important decisions. So you can see here that the committee chair, for example, will be renewed every year. The vice chair will be renewed every year, and so on and so forth. So plenty of movement in order to ensure that the sort of power can be centralized over any given period of time. And speaking of council member decisions, the most critical of decisions will require unanimous council support. And some of the decisions that will be made will be the direction of the code base, the sale of reserve tokens from Treasury, any control mutability sort of requirements, and we'll talk about control mutability later on as we talk through the API. But yes, Hedera has control mutability built in, and this enables the council to address any illegal and malicious content within the platform. I should say, control mutability does not apply to accounts. It's been asked a few times before. Hedera does not have the ability to modify an account, only files and smart contracts, but we'll talk about that later on. And they will also be looking at network requirements to serve global markets. So that's the governance model at a high level. As you can see, it's pretty unique to the DLT industry in general. Looking at security, Hedera Hashgraph has the strongest level of security possible, which is asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. This platform is the only distributed ledger technology that has formally proven this through a cock proof. We achieved this earlier this year, or I should say middle of last year in 2018. So let's take a look at ABFT in more detail. So we consider ABFT a critical security functionality for enterprise-grade decentralized applications. It's resilient to DDoS attacks, botnets, and firewalls because it does not make assumptions on how fast messages are passed over the internet. So this is critical, really important. There is no, when messages are being exchanged between nodes, they have no kind of built-in expectation of how long that message will take. Joking aside, we did discuss internally whether it was possible to put a node on Mars and have it participate in consensus. And the answer is yes, it could. Timing of message delivery is unimportant, which makes the consensus algorithm highly resilient. It also ensures consensus finality and records with state proofs that can be called to validate any transaction with mathematical proof. So consensus finality is, I guess it touches on the not probabilistic like proof of work. So consensus reached by Hedera is not probabilistic, which is often the case with proof of work systems. In those systems, it's entirely possible, although rare, that a transaction could be rolled back. I think this was probably written or prepared as a bunch of slides. I know it was done before some events recently where we've seen transactions being rolled back on some well-known networks. As I said earlier, with blockchain, the probability that a block will change reduces over time, but it never reaches 100 probability that it can never change. There is always, mathematically speaking, a 0.1% chance that could happen. Whereas Hedera Hashgraph is 100% final. Once you have consensus, it's done. That's it. It will not change. We don't rely, or we don't have to rely on a number of confirmation of blocks within 3 to 5 seconds of your consensus being achieved for a given transaction. It's 100% guaranteed. And that's of significant importance to those enterprises who need to rely on the kind of safety, if you want, of their transactions not being rolled back. And finally, ABFT followed a 1/3 rule. It allows us to achieve consensus finality, but only if bad actors control less than 1/3 of the stake in a proof of stake system, or 1/3 of nodes in a non-proof of stake system. So the Hashgraph algorithm can be deployed in a non-proof of stake system, and this is the case in the private swells implementation. A node, 1/3 of the nodes are a greater number of nodes that are malicious, which is greater than 1/3, could affect consensus. But within Hedera Hashgraph, we have the proof of stake with proxying, meaning that it's not a node count, but a stake count. And if you remember this, I'll be asking the question in one of the later slides. So how do we prevent Sybil attack? there are two common attacks in distributed public ledgers, Sybil and DDos. So a Sybil attack is performed when a malicious actor creates thousands of nodes in the hope of gaining influence over the network. If the number of nodes is relevant and you have enough funds to spin up virtual or physical infrastructure to swamp a network with your own nodes that you control, you can arguably take control of the network, and that's what's known as a Sybil attack. Hedera Hashgraph being a proof-of-stake system, you can spin up as many nodes as you want, but if you don't stake cryptocurrency to those nodes, you cannot manipulate the network. So we're sort of safe from Sybil attack, in as much as if you create additional nodes on the network, you will have to divide your stake or the node's stake by the number of nodes on the network. In other words, a node with zero stake has arguably zero voting power. So if you have 1,000 tokens and one node, then you vote, or your node votes with 1,000 tokens. If you create 1,000 nodes, you have to give them each one token. So you have 1,000 nodes voting with one token. Well, guess what? Your influence on consensus is exactly the same whether you have 1 or 1,000 nodes. There is, however, the possibility that somebody could centralize cryptocurrency, which could negatively impact the network. And by centralizing the cryptocurrency, what we mean is somebody could amass sufficient cryptocurrency that they could spin up a number of nodes and stake all of their cryptocurrency and essentially take over consensus. However, Hedera has a slow token release schedule to prevent this. So 33% of the 50 billion tokens will never reach circulation for approximately 5 years. And the expectation is at that point, buying that many tokens or coins will be prohibitively expensive. So during that 5-year period, 65% of the cryptocurrency will be managed by the Hedera Hashgraph Council Treasury and will be proxy staked to council member nodes. Essentially, by locking out, if you want, 33% or 65% of the cryptocurrency, it's impossible for somebody to take the network over for at least for the first few years, and by the time we get there, it will hopefully be too expensive to consider. DDoS is an attack whereby an attacker corrupts sort of a computer by flooding it with traffic. So the gossip protocol, which is used by Hedera Hashgraph, which is known as gossip about gossip, is a natively cooperative defense against DDoS attack. You can DDoS a node, but all of the other nodes will carry on gossiping amongst each other. Or you could DDoS a node, but the rest of the network will continue gossiping with each other. And we're also leaderless, which I mentioned earlier, which means that if you were to take out one single node, or if somebody were to take out a single node through DDoS, then the entire system is not compromised because the other nodes will continue gossiping and virtual voting, and consensus will occur. So finally, the stability of the platform is the kind of fourth tenet that is of importance to global adoption. So our governance will offer legal and technical controls, which will ensure the platform will meet global regulatory requirements. The Hashgraph algorithm is patented, which I'm sure you all know. the patent will provide developers and companies confidence that the platform and cryptocurrency will not be forked by a divided community, which would create instability in market share and the development of applications on the network. So we've seen this over and over again, only as recently as a few months ago. Forking of cryptocurrency platforms creates a huge amount of instability, and some would argue that the crypto winter that we're in at the moment could be due to enthusiasm waning, maybe, or a recent fork that has kind of got a lot of people concerned. So we do not want Hedera Hashgraph to fork, so it remains stable in that sense. And I was reading an article only as of yesterday saying that Hedera Hashgraph is closed source. It's not. It will be open review. Anyone will be able to inspect and compile the code and make sure that there are no backdoors. It was in that article. So yeah, you can all verify for yourselves that everything is as intended, and it would be, I guess, unlikely that a public DLT would succeed if that code base wasn't open review in the first place. So it will be done. So, 3 services, as I mentioned, cryptocurrency, smart contracts, and file storage. The cryptocurrency is known as HBAR, and because of the bandwidth efficiency and low latency of the Hashgraph consensus, it's possible to send and receive HBAR fast and cheaply. So much so that decentralized applications are able to take advantage of practical micropayment functionalities never before possible. We've demonstrated this with a phase 1 community testing. If you've used the timestamp website, you've been able to earn HBAR while spending it. So you were being paid more than you were spending, but that was the point of rewarding for testing. The point here was that looking at an article you were paying for with your HBAR in arguably insignificant amounts of kind of value. It was very, very low. And while this is going on, the network is still being rewarded through transaction fees in a way that makes it stable or viable. So micropayments to a thousandth or hundredth of a cent are definitely a possibility here, thanks to the efficiency of the Hashgraph algorithm. HBAR is an integral part of developing on the Hedera platform. Developers will use HBAR to pay transaction fees, which is made up of node, service, and network fees. We'll cover that in more detail later on. And all this in order to able to use the platform's services. Now, when I say developers will use HBAR to pay transaction fees, a developer who's writing an app or that is being used by end users can, of course, sort of ask the end users to pay for the transaction fees. It's not necessarily up to the developer to pay for them entirely. So economic models will build out of that. Smart contracts based on Solidity can run on Hedera Hashgraph, and this is so the fairness of Hedera Hashgraph extends to smart contracts. I've mentioned this earlier. We offer fair ordering based on the median timestamp agreed upon by the nodes on the network, rather than the amount of gas paid. So, as I said before, artificially inflating the gas being paid for a smart contract will not earn you top of the queue processing. You will join the queue based on timestamp ordering. And that developers can execute smart contracts simultaneously on the Hedera network using realms. So realms are a subdivision of a shard. And within any given realm, a smart contract or all smart contracts or all smart contract functions have to run sequentially. It's not possible otherwise to run smart contracts in parallel. Realms is new. The traditional sort of categorization of things, if we want, in DLTs, is shards. So within a shard, we can have multiple realms, and each of those realms is able to run smart contracts simultaneously. So two smart contracts can run in two different realms at the same time, which gives us a scale that is not otherwise possible within a given shard. Realms are not currently available, as far as I know, but they will be eventually. And finally, on the services, the file storage allows you to reliably store files on the Hedera Hashgraph ledger. Write access control lists can be used to manage files, create complex voting rules, and more. Public files can be verified with state proofs, and the files stored on the Hedera Hashgraph are highly available, with the benefits of asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance. Highly available in that each file will reside on every single node that's participating in the network, as opposed to being sort of split up in lots of bits in a kind of peer-to-peer fashion, or merely sort of backed up on one or two additional nodes. Within Hedera Hashgraph, every file will exist on every single node. So that makes it, in a way, relatively expensive as a service for file storage. So we suggest that it's used for small file sizes even, storing crypto hashes or acting as pointers